again. The biggest question mark on him when you broke down the film in Colorado was, does he have any ball skills? He ended up, I believe, having 4 interceptions this year.
And he's the cornerback, just so we're clear,
the corner.
right? Yep.
Yeah. And then he goes out there. He was 6'1", almost 200 pounds, 197. He goes and runs a 4.44, and his fastest time was a 4.38. He's a smooth, big, good-looking athlete. And there's a bunch of corners in this draft, and they're all clustered together like we talk about, maybe 5 or 6, and I think this kid really helped himself in becoming maybe the number 1 cornerback off the board this draft coming up.
And that's exactly what I was about to ask you, because Joey Porter Jr., we're not going to talk about him this segment. He was my cornerback 1 coming into the draft. During the telecast, they were actually speaking to Joey Porter Sr. as he watched his son run, which was a unique perspective. And Joey Porter Jr. ran in the low 4.4s, high 4.5s, and he wasn't happy about it. Does that change your opinion as an evaluator when it comes to what Christian Gonzalez did?
No. You're going to go back and you're going to have your meetings, and you're going to go back and watch all this tape again. Now you're going to add the numbers that you have into it, so it'll be interesting to see if Porter Jr. or if Gonzalez comes off the board in this year's draft first.
Okay, I'm going to go with DJ Turner, who is a guy that we haven't talked a lot about because he wasn't in the first-round conversation. I don't think anything's changed, but my man ran a 4.26 40, and it doesn't matter what you were thinking of him. Tariq Woolen came here last year as a converted wide receiver early on in his career in college, ran in the 4.2s, and I'm sure people set up and took notice. Ended up going on day 3, probably should have gone on day 2, worst case. DJ Turner is a smaller cornerback. He weighed, what do you see? He weighed 178, 5'11", so he's not as big as you might want. But what does the 4.26 say to you? Because I think he's catapulted himself into day 2.
Yeah, and it confirmed what you've seen on tape. He's not technically sound in everything he does, but when he gets vertically stretched down the field, he did a couple times in the tapes I watched, will bite on a double move. Yeah. But you can see that catch-up speed on tape, and it just was confirmed when he ran that 4.26 tonight.
The 178 weight, does that concern you at all?
A little bit, but my next winner is going to be concerned weight-wise. But I love this kid.
Emmanuel Forbes.
That's a tease.
Yeah, it's a great tease. You've been in the business for 3, 4, 5 months.
5 months.
So Emmanuel Forbes, you saw him live in person, correct?
Yeah, I did. I saw him live against Alabama this fall.
And you're not very active on social media, but you made a point to note back in the fall that Emmanuel Forbes is a guy to keep an eye on for the reasons you're about to talk about. And let me tell you quickly, 4.35 unofficial, 6 feet, but he's only 166.
6'1". 166.
Sorry, that's right.
So he puts him over 6 feet. He has 32-inch arm length, which is critical. And when I watched him on tape, I thought he had the best ball skills out of anyone I watched of the corners this year. And I know he's skinny, but he has excellent speed, excellent quickness. You can see how he turns his hips there.
What about those legs? I'm sorry to interrupt you. How skinny are his legs, though?
Well, it doesn't matter. If he can cover a receiver,
okay.
You're not going to ask him to get there in a 3 technique and start to take on double teams.
Okay,
this guy's going to be an outside corner. You cover that cat, and that cat will not catch the ball. And you know what he reminded me of a little bit? His ball skills reminded me a little bit of Diggs when he came out of Alabama.
Trevon, Stephon's brother.
Yes, and then the other guy that he kind of reminded me of when I was back in Miami in the early 2000s, there was a skinny corner that ended up going to the Pro Bowl, and his name was Sam Madison, who came out of Louisville.
Very good player, no doubt about it. I want to turn to our guy, and just quickly, Emmanuel Forbes has gotten some first-round buzz in the media. Where do you see him as a top 50 guy? Is he higher than that?
Definitely an early Friday guy.
Gotcha.
I think he's going to go in the 2nd round. Now, what's going to knock him down is 166 pounds, but he has everything you want in a corner except the weight.
And to your point, you don't play in shorts, so it doesn't matter what his legs look like if he's covering like you want him to cover people. My guy, we talked about this in Mobile. We talked about it in the weeks in between. Darius Rush, the cornerback out of South Carolina. The conversation for most of the fall was Cam Smith, his teammate on the opposite side, who has a chance to be a first-round pick. Darius Rush, I watched him before the Senior Bowl. I had a day 3 grade on him. I watched him ball out in the one-on-one drills at the Senior Bowl, which is incredibly important. I moved him up to early day 3, and this guy just keeps making plays. You talked to me about him, about how he's a great teammate. The coaches loved him down in South Carolina. That's incredibly important. Also important, Rick, he ran a 4.37 4.77 unofficial. He's 6'2". He's 198. His arms are 33 3/8 inches. Tell me what's wrong with this young man.
Well, there's nothing wrong with him now. Like, everybody went down to South Carolina. You're looking at Cam Smith because he's supposed to be a first-round talent. So he got overlooked a little bit. But this kid is one of those kids that keep ascending through this process. He's a smooth, athletic kid. I thought he was a little stiff when I watched tape. Now, when you watch him turn here, what you watch is when they come down that hash, when they turn their hips, do they come off that line?
Yeah.
And he was a lot smoother than I anticipated. You can see him get off the line
That
there.
looks pretty good.
Yeah, but when you go up, watch him go up and get the ball. He has excellent hands. He showed that down at the Senior Bowl, and then he goes and blows out the combine with these numbers. He is definitely a day 2 corner and has really been climbing through this whole process.
Yeah, he's been a fun story, and I think he feels like a top 75 guy, and I don't feel too bad about saying that, or is that too much?
No, because the way some of these corners ran today, I wouldn't be surprised if 10 or 12 of these guys go by the end of the second round.
So let's go to your next guy, and we talked to him on the set here yesterday. Deontay Banks, you may know him from the program guide, and he was a little quirky, and he's a good young man, and his answers were short, and maybe he was nervous. He had confidence, but it just felt like some of his answers were a little quirky, I think is the word. Not in a bad way, but you don't care. Like, none of that matters. And you said at the time, I don't care about. He's fine. There's nothing to be concerned about.
No, and as we did talk with him, he got more comfortable on TV, and maybe the first time he's had interviews like that.
That's true.
So,
and when you told him that I said he ran a 4.75, he seemed to warm up to you really quickly. So it turns out he didn't run a 4.75. He did a little better than that. 4.35, 42-inch vertical. That's pretty good.
Yeah, no, and he's another 6-foot corner, 197 pounds. He is a guy that excels in man coverage. He can flip his hips. He can run downfield. Very smooth. And when you watch these guys run, you can see how smooth they are. And sometimes you don't think they're going to run as fast. Here's this hip turn thing that I thought was excellent as he turned. And then let's go see if he goes and tracks the ball. Excellent job high pointing the ball and get it upfield and accelerate. So this is another kid who hasn't been mentioned much in the first round, maybe a afterthought here or there, but I think he put himself on the map this week.
Yeah, he's a first-round guy for me all day long. And also, interestingly, and you watched his teammate as well on the other side, Ja'Cory Bennett. He ran to the 4.3s as well at Maryland. And I'll just ask you this. Why was that defense not better? You have guys like that dominating. They have some guys who get drafted. Is that something you think about, or that's not?
No, all I'm concerned about, let the Coach Locks and them worry about the defense. All I want to do is see these guys, how athletic they are, and can they cover, and all these guys can. And Maryland has 2 really, really, really good corners.
Yeah, another guy who was really good. Again, we spoke with him yesterday, and he showed up with an edge, and when he was done, I was ready to fight you for who loved him more, Julius Juju Brents.
You can have him.
Okay, I'll take him. I appreciate it. That's a win for me, no doubt about it. And he ended up measuring. He's 6'2.5". He looked taller than 6'2.5" in person, maybe because he was so.
Well, you're horrible at estimates.
This is true. He was 198, 34-inch arms, and more importantly, perhaps he ran a 4.53. I think that's plenty fast, unofficial, for a guy that size who plays with that physicality. And I never saw on tape him getting beat downfield.
Yeah, well, you should have watched the TCU game.
That game, but okay, what? It was against Quentin Johnson. Go ahead, tell me about him.
Yeah, this kid is surprisingly athletic, and he's a big corner, but he has little man corner skills. You can see his movement. I thought he was very smooth through these drills tonight. He also caught the ball very well, but you can see this guy can drop his weight and get into and out of his cuts.
So again, and he draws comparisons, unfairly or not, to Tariq Woolen, from UTSA last year.
What did you say Tariq ran?
He ran in the 4.2s.
Okay, this is 4.5, so it's a little different cat.
But he was a converted wide receiver. There were concerns about, not concerns, but he didn't have the experience to play potentially as a top 50 pick or whatever in terms of starting right away. Cornerback, turns out a lot of people outside of Seattle were wrong. Julius Brents, I'm taking him on day 2 and not thinking twice about it.
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, you okay with that?
Yeah, that's fine.
Another guy that's going to go on day 2, and Rick's prayers were answered because this young man, admittedly, and you actually said as much, he had a tough Senior Bowl.
Yeah.
And that's fine.
He got better as the week went along.
He got better, and guys have tough Senior Bowls. It doesn't mean it's the end of the world for your NFL career. He had a lot of good tape at Cal. This is safety. Daniel Scott, and he ran a 4.45 40. He at times looked a little slow, but that could at the Senior Bowl, and that could be for any number of reasons. But he came out here and had a good afternoon.
Yeah, when you watch him on tape, this is a tough physical safety. He can play down in the box. I think when a player runs this type of speed, then you're going to not be as concerned if he has to play in the deep half of the field. And I think this kid is a smart, intelligent football player. That's one of the critical factors you're looking for at safety. And when you combine that size with that speed, I think he's going to shoot up the draft boards as well.
Before the Senior Bowl, he was one of my top safeties. I got a little nervous at the Senior Bowl, and now,
just trust me. Just go along with the flow.
I trusted Rick, and he got one right, as Pete Prisco might say. All right, let's go to the other side, guys, whose stock maybe fell a little bit, took a hit. Not the end of the world. They still have their pro days and all the tape to lean back on, but either way, we need to talk about them. Another young man we spoke with yesterday, A.J. Anthony Johnson out of UVA, big cornerback. He's measured in at 6'2", ran at 4.64. He was 205, 32 and 5/8 inch arms, which is plenty long, I'd imagine, for the cornerback position. But the 4.64 is what sticks out. And my immediate question, and I talked to scouts in the fall, so we're worried about how fast he is. Are you immediately saying, okay, he should move
Did
inside?
you stay on his bandwagon after they talked about him like that?
Yeah, because he had a good Senior Bowl. I thought he did pretty well, better in the game than some of the practices. But that's not to be that's not unexpected necessarily. But when you see the 4.6, do you think maybe safety might be in your future?
Now all of a sudden there's going to be some safety talk, because I agree with you that he is physical. He's better in press than he is in off coverage. He flipped his hips. He did a pretty good job staying with those receivers down at the Senior Bowl, although the top receivers weren't down there. Many of the top receivers weren't. But this kid was a good football player. But when you run a 4.64, you really got to question, can this guy line up against NFL caliber receivers at the next level?
And that's a fair question. He's a great young man, a great teammate, but at the end of the day, the 6 after the 4 is what troubles you.
Yeah, and I don't know if I would have invited him to our set, but again, I deferred to you because he's one of your pet cats.
Yeah, and I'm glad I got a chance to talk with him. So that makes me feel better. Here's a name. Look, he's not a combine faller, but I wanted to put him on here because your guy and my guy, our safety one, Brian Branch, he ran a 4.58 unofficially.
Yeah.
Everything else is fine. He's incredibly quick. We talked to him yesterday, and clearly Nick Saban trusts that young man because he was on the field every healthy snap. Does the 4.58 as a slot receiver concern you at all?
Yeah, that's going to be a little bit of a concern.
Okay.
He's quicker than he is fast. He has excellent instincts and vision. He's quick to react what he sees happening in front of him. But with that 4.58, teams might start to look at him more as a safety than a nickel corner, although he does bring some versatility to the defense. But that 4.58 will be some concern for some teams.
Still safety one, though.
Yes.
Yeah, I mean, Daniel Scott did himself some favors. I don't think Brian Branch hurt himself necessarily.
And I don't know, and just to be honest, I don't think this is a great safety class overall.
No, I agree with that. Speaking of which, let's talk about Jay Ward, who plays the defensive back for LSU. He ran a 4.55, and again, when you're playing that position with the requirements that are on there, and he played a lot in the slot as well, what does that say to you? Because he's not as big as Brian Branch either.
Right, and he was a good football player. When
Absolutely.
you watch it on tape, he's a guy, one of those combinations guys. He's going to play as a nick over the third receiver, the slot receiver. Is he going to be a free safety? So, again, these guys that ran into 4.5s, you want your nick corners to be quick. So what teams will do will start looking at all the shuttles, all the jumps, and see how explosive they are. But the one thing that teams will get worried about, if they're quick, they can cover underneath stuff because they can mirror the receivers in their routes. Where the issue comes if the slot receiver, or whoever they're on, stretches them vertically down the field.
Right.
Do they have enough speed to stay on the hip of the receiver?
And when I said he's smaller than Branch, he weighed 2 pounds less, 190 versus 188. He was an inch taller. So there's a trade-off there. Let's do one more before we go to break so we can get to our guy, Danny Cannell. And I'll give you your choice. Do you want to do Caillou Blue Kelly, Christopher Smith, or Jamie Robinson as your last guy?
The guy that I thought was one heck of a football player and had a great year was Christopher Smith.
Yeah.
He's small, but he's very instinctive. He's always in position to make plays, but he was 5'10", 192, which is a concern. So you want to see a smaller free safety type guy like he is, faster. And he plays faster than this, but the 4.66, that's going to kill him. 4.66 is tough to play in the league as a defensive back. So I imagine a guy that may have snuck into day 2 is definitely going to be a day 3 guy, and he may fall farther.
And potentially a bargain, but again, 4.66, that's the point where you might get
the
concerned.
one thing that I want to point out that you have to be conscientious of is this doesn't determine what type of football player these guys are. He didn't run well, but he's one heck of a football player, and guys like that know how to play the game end up making it and being an impact type player.
All right, Rick, I actually learned something. We've been here a week. I learned something from our guy Rick Spielman, our general manager. When we come back, it's going to be our quarterback, Danny Cannell. We're going to preview the quarterbacks. They're going to be here tomorrow, working out, that is, and he'll tell you which quarterback should have the most to worry about going into the workouts tomorrow. We'll be right back after this. Look at those two handsome guys there. We have another handsome guy on the set. It is the face, the quarterback of the With the First Pick podcast. That's the face of Danny Cannell there. And Danny, we were talking just before the break about your experiences here, 1996.
Yeah. It was not quite the same. There was not as much media exposure. It wasn't televised live. And you were asking me, did I work out? And I would say to you...
You hesitated because you weren't sure.
Well, no, because I wanted to make sure I got the answer correctly. I would never want to deceive anybody.
I had to go back and dig up that report.
That's right. So let's go back to 96. What is the most important thing a quarterback should have to do?
Throw the ball.
I threw the ball.
Okay.
That's what I came to do. I did not do anything else. And that was my mindset. And that's what teams, they asked me, what do you want to do? So I ran the 40 at my pro day because everything was, it's a slow time. And all I wanted to do was have a 4 in front of it. I didn't care if it was 4.9999.
Yeah.
I just wanted to be sub 5. And I was worried that it was going to be tight. But at my pro day, 4.78 was ready to hang it up, and they said, no, come on, let's get one more. 4.81 the second one.
That's still good though. So if you thought he was going to fly,
not so fast.
Okay,
I got to go dig up my reports. Everybody ran 4.3 when they came out. When they're sitting on a set right now, everybody was Deion Sanders.
It might have been wind-aided at Mike Long track.
Sure wasn't 4 after the decimal point, 5.4 something.
Rick's incredibly skeptical if you haven't figured that out. So we're going to talk about these quarterbacks that are going to be here throwing tomorrow, much like Danny, except for your guy Bryce Young, interestingly enough. He won't work out, but the rest of the guys with something to prove will do that. And we'll just talk quickly about the quarterbacks. And why don't you give me, I know the answer to this, give me the guy you're most excited to see. Just before we get to the actual questions, just in general, who are you most excited to see tomorrow work out?
Well, I'm excited to see all 4 of these guys because it's an opportunity, except Bryce is not going to throw, but to see the 3 that are trying to get up there close to Bryce, and maybe one of these guys come out of this and become the #1 overall pick. But when you get to see these guys throw back to back to back, that way you can make that comparison in the same environment with all the same conditions. So I'm excited to see all the top quarterbacks throw.
Anyone that sticks out to you, just in general terms?
I was going to say, man, I feel bad for like the 10 other guys that are out there that are trying to.
There are other quarterbacks here?
Right.
We haven't talked about any of them.
That's right.
I pulled one out. Teaser.
Yeah,
that's right. There is the big 4 and the 3, of course, that are throwing. But I would echo what you're saying. And if you're looking at the big 3 and you're looking up at those, if you're one of the other 6, 7, or 8 guys, it's your opportunity to maybe turn ahead that says, hold on a second, we didn't realize you were this close, or the gap wasn't that wide. That to me is the biggest advantage for the scouts and the GMs and the coaches is the comparison, because it's hard when you go to a pro day and let's say you go to Tuscaloosa and then you fly over to Athens and then you go down to Tallahassee and you're trying to remember, like, how did that look again? But you are getting to see them right next to each other.
And Rick, let me ask you quickly, from your experience as general manager and just personnel evaluator, is there a situation where you were at in the combine sitting in the suites and you saw a quarterback that wasn't going to be one of the top 3, 4, 5 guys that got your attention based on the workout?
No, you may see it, but you're going to always go back to the film and what you saw on tape. This just verifies or maybe puts a red flag or concern.
Yeah.
But we don't go back and all of a sudden, like Christopher Smith that we just talked about, the safety. I know he ran slow, but he's a good football player, so he may get stacked a little bit. But if you had him develop, let's say, in the 4th or 5th round, you're not going to make him a college free agent. You're going to put him in that area, but you're going to stack him against guys in that same area.
All right,
let's say something real quick just on Bryce Young not throwing. I think strategically that's a really smart move.
Yeah.
And I don't like it either. But we're worried about his height. We're worried about his weight.
No, I think that's right.
If he throws next to those guys, I don't think it's going to be as impressive. And so and if you're the #1 guy, which he is, the only direction you can go is down. So why go out there and risk it? You go to Tuscaloosa, comfy confines, and you blow people away there when they're.
I will channel Rick's feeling because you need to be competitive. I rolled the ball up there.
I get it. But I think he's making a smart move.
I don't disagree with you. Rick does. Let's do some superlatives. This will be fun because I'm looking at Danny's list now, and if you don't look, don't cheat. Okay. That's how you got through school. I see you looking over people's shoulders. All right, I'll go first because this was pretty easy for me, and I know Rick. I want to hear what you say here. The best arm in this class, I went with Anthony Richardson, just because I was struck by the young man's size, the way he just approaches.
18. Go ahead.
But he's a daunting individual physically, and we've seen some of the things he's thrown. Someone told me earlier this week that he threw the ball at one of these camps 70 yards, did a backflip and landed before the ball hit the ground. Who has the best arm here, in your opinion?
My opinion, it's Will Levis, and I saw him, especially on the 21 tape. He made every throw, but when you see a quarterback that can make a 15-yard out route from the opposite hash, and you look at the college quarterbacks, okay, those hashes are a little bit wider, so when they're thrown from the opposite hash and they can put it on a thread, and I thought Will Levis did that in a lot of the tape I saw.
Well, wait till you hear this. Brace yourself. Who has the best arm in this class for you, Danny?
Okay, let me tell you guys the way so you said best arm, not strongest arm, correct?
Okay, yeah.
Best arm is the way I looked at it, because there have been a long list of guys that could throw it out of the stadium that couldn't hit the side of a barn, and I want to see somebody who has the combination of both the physical strength that can make all the throws, but also can put it in a pinpoint, precision, accurate spot. C.J. Stroud was 71% and 67% in his 2 years at Ohio State. I think he might have the most to gain because it's like Bryce Young and then it's Anthony Richardson and all the upside. And CJ kind of gets like in this tweener spot where people don't really know what to do with him. I think he's going to impress with. And the other thing I like about his throwing motion, it looks very effortless, and it's a very natural throwing motion, which to me is one of those things that I think should be important because you're not going to have to worry about mechanics or tweaking something in his throw. It's just going to come off, and I think you're going to see the ball jump off his hand.
I can buy that. I can buy the
but I
saw your guys' answers.
If Debo, our producer, would have said arm strength or arm talent, we would have been able to be on the same page.
I'll repeat to you what you said to Will Levis. Don't make excuses. All right, best physical body and most athletic. We all agree. No surprise there. Everyone said Bryce Young. All right, let's move on. Anthony Richardson. That was an easy one. When Anthony Richardson walked on the set, he looked more physically imposing than Will Anderson. And
he looked like a linebacker or an outside defensive end.
And I think Cam Newton is the perfect comp because it is a wow factor. Like Josh Allen was big, but he's not chiseled. I mean, we're talking like 5 or 6 body fat percentage. I mean, it's off the charts.
So best decision maker, Rick, you and I agree. Bryce Young, you because, as Prisco says, you were paid by Alabama. Me because I appreciate the way the young man plays. But, I mean, look, seriously, we can agree. He didn't have the wide receivers.
He's a fine young man, too.
Fine young man. He didn't have the receivers that Tua or Mac had. And the things he was able to do out of structure, off platform, showed up week in and week out. You had a different answer for best decision maker. Who'd you go with?
I went with Hendon Hooker. You know I've been big on him for a while. And so when I look at a quarterback like this, what decision-making is what do you do with the football in your hands? He had 58 touchdowns and only 5 interceptions. That is a high volume of throws, and he made outstanding decisions with the football, protecting it. He also rushed for 10 touchdowns. So you go 68 total touchdowns versus 5 interceptions. That, to me, is the definition of a great decision-maker.
Can he do the same thing in an NFL offense besides the gimmick offense that Tennessee kind of runs?
So, but, I mean, it's the same thing of you guys saying, well, Bryce Young doesn't have the receivers. I mean, Tennessee, he
still threw the heck out of the ball.
Yeah, he did, but also, like, Hendon Hooker, he lost Cedric Tillman this year. Jalen Hyatt already steps up. And I get the criticisms of the system, but I think still when that football's in your hand, Josh Heupel, his coach, is asking him to make good decisions, and they don't excel, and he doesn't have that type of year if he doesn't make those decisions in that system. So it'll be interesting to see if he can make that jump. I think he can.
Yeah, just watching the tape, if anyone can figure out how to cover the scissor route, because all they did was cross, run deep, and then throw the ball up there and hit one of those guys open, because there were a lot of guys open down the field.
Well, Rick, let me ask you and Danny both, because Hendon Hooker, you asked him that question, and his response, he went through all the pre-snap things he has to do. He talked about changing the call of the line of scrimmage, which he was asked to do, calling the protections. Did that change your opinion at all?
No, that's called combine prep. Because he would, and I give him credit because he came in here and was prepared for that.
Okay.
I'll say this: did anybody complain about those 2 touchdowns that Patrick Mahomes threw in the Super Bowl that were wide open that he probably could have thrown left-handed?
That's a great point, Danny.
Sometimes guys are schemed open. That's a credit to Heupel too.
All right, let's go to best overall intangibles. Danny, I'll let you start this one because all our answers are different, which is interesting.
Who did I have over there?
Bryce Young.
Yeah, I mean, for me, now we gave you a hard time today with the Charlie Ward comment. Now, this is actually my comp for Bryce Young.
I just had the
Charlie
wrong
Ward.
quarter.
Yeah, exactly. You had the wrong guy. 100%. Charlie Ward is one of the most underrated passers, but intangibles, when you sit down, he's instantly likable. He's humble. I think his players gravitate toward him. And we were talking earlier about the moments that he had. There is never a single moment where it was too big for him.
Right.
He was on the road at Iron. Their biggest, I mean, if you guys, college football, that rivalry is the most intense rivalry. You're about to lose to Auburn, and you're backed up. You got to go 90 yards to send it to overtime. And he marches them down the field, converts multiple 4th downs, and it's like no big deal. And his pulse doesn't look like it's over 85.
Right.
Like he just looks so calm, poised. I think he's got the total package when you think about intangibles. Plus, you play for Saban, who knows how to prep you. Look at Jalen Hurts, the impact that he had on the Eagles, and he brought a lot of Saban's, mentality with him. So I'll go with Bryce Young.
And I had a hard time here because I wanted to put Bryce Young in here, as you figured.
You're right, a lot of answers,
But
Bryce
I
Young.
went with Hooker.
Yeah.
And the reason I went with him because I had a different interpretation of intangibles. I was concerned, or I was looking at the off-field intangibles, and it was confirmed today, I believe when we talked to Hyatt today, that, hey, Hooker was the first one. We had practice in the morning. His car was the first one there every day. Everybody raves about his leadership skills, his maturity. He was very impressive when we sat here and talked with him today, so I went with Hooker.
And I went with C.J. Stroud for overall intangibles because for many of the reasons that Danny talked about in terms of the way he plays, but also we've talked to him twice now, once at the Super Bowl, once here this morning, and he has a presence about him. You get the sense that his teammates buy into what he's selling. He takes care of his offensive lineman, which Danny has noted is incredibly important to your health and your future, and he makes play after play. Now, he is not as dynamic in terms of big play after big play like Bryce Young, but when you have Marvin Harrison Jr., or last year you had Garrett Wilson and Chris Olave, you don't necessarily have to be, but I think that's going to translate well to the next level because he's had that success, and I think we all agree that he's a better passer now than Justin Fields was when he was certainly coming out. This one we also...
C.J. Stroud blew me away today in person. I think he comes across better in person than he does on camera.
I think you're exactly
all
right.
Season long, we watched from afar, and he had had a great year. He puts up big numbers. For whatever reason, it didn't come across the camera when you're watching from afar. But when he sat down with us, I was really surprised with how much personality, how much confidence he is, and just comfortable in his own skin. I thought that was really important.
I think that's right. All right, let's speed it up here so we can get through these things because the people want what the people want here. Most pressure facing the person with the most pressure as they go into tomorrow's workout, I think we all agree, is Will Levis. Danny, why don't you tell me why you think that's the case?
Because he said, I've got the cannon, I want to showcase it, so now you got to go do it.
Yeah.
And coming off a down year. And you want to see if he can make a move up in this quarterback ranking.
I know we're trying to move fast. I have a quick question for you.
Yeah.
Does accuracy matter in this one because you don't know the receivers?
No, what I looked at was the time, as far as the feet, the technique, because all these guys play in the shotgun.
Mm-hmm.
So when they have to do drop back passing, do 3-step, 5-step, some play action stuff, can they get their feet set and still throw the ball? Because that takes some coordination.
Mm-hmm.
People don't realize, and I'll tell you about quarterback play. But,
No, you're 100% right. Yeah.
and that's the biggest thing. But the timing is going to be off because they haven't worked with the receivers. You can be throwing to a receiver that runs a 10-yard out. Well, he breaks it off at 8. The next guy breaks it off at 12. I was more looking at the technical aspect when these guys throw.
So we all agree that the best all-around prospect is Bryce Young, which is no surprise there. We all agree that Anthony Richardson has the most potential. Biggest sleeper, Danny, Aiden O'Connell, which I like that pick.
Yeah, well, if you want a pocket passer too, because he's the definition of it. Not going to give you a whole lot of running, but he's got like 6'3", 210. He's thrown a ton. He's thrown it a ton at Purdue. He led the Big Ten a couple years ago. I think he's phenomenal. He's got the intangibles you're looking for.
Okay, Jake Haener was your guy. Hendon Hooker was my guy. But I want to talk about what measurements matter for the quarterbacks as we get through this process here. We're going to find out tomorrow what Bryce, secretly because you've been down there and you have access to such information. But of all the quarterbacks, the top 4 especially, is there any one thing that you need to see that makes you feel better about this?
The biggest myth out there has always been hand size because everybody wanted to know, well, if he has to play in cold weather, can he still grip the ball? Or if the ball's wet and you're playing in wet conditions. But we went ahead, and that was a big issue with Teddy Bridgewater. And we went ahead and drafted Teddy Bridgewater. And before the devastating knee injury, I thought he was going to be extremely. And then last year we went through the same thing with Pickett. Well, his hand's under 9 inches long. But Pickett, I think, is going to be a heck of a football player. He progressed every year, so I think that myth should be shot down.
Totally agree. I hate the hand size discussion. I just think it's I think you want to have confirmation of what you've already seen, but the game film, I think, and what you've done on the field should be 70 to 80% of the evaluation, and the remaining 20 to 30 should be broken up between the interviews, the 40 time, the height. Like, are you in shape? Like, a lot of this is like, are you smart enough to work out and make sure you present yourself in a good
you would
way?
hope with these agents taking him and taking him to all these training. If you come in here out of shape and after your agent,
red flag.
just spend all that money to get you in shape, that's a red flag.
Or even worse, if you somehow fail a drug test while you're here. That to me is
But they're all fine young men.
They're all fine young men, and that's a great way to end it. This is our last show, the Pick Six podcast show here on CBS Sports HQ for the week, but we'll be back with the first pick, excuse me. That's how much time I've been spending with Rick and Danny. By the way, you know it's bad when Dane's laughing at us offset, but with the first pick podcast show here on CBS Sports HQ. So it's been a good week. We'll be back all 3 times a week going
you guys
forward.
are blowing up 3 days a week.
Wherever you get your podcast, watch With the First Pick. You can watch it on Spotify, on Apple,
YouTube.
On YouTube as well. Thank you. And again, NFL scouting combine coverage all week. We'll be here tomorrow as well. Danny and I talking these quarterbacks, so be sure to check that out. Thank you, guys.